From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's the Under the Radar podcast.
Elitek Vehicle Services, an LKQ company, is the premier sublet provider for mobile and remote diagnostic services.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl with another episode of Under the Radar, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Elitek Vehicle Services, an LKQ company. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Don Smith. He is the Senior Director of Remote Operations for Elitek. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. And so, as you know, there's been some controversy lately regarding insurers trying to get their arms around and get control of scanning and calibration costs. So my first question to you, Don, is, what is Elitek Vehicle Services' position on this?
Well, thanks for the easy question to lead this off. I appreciate it. Really for us, we want to make sure we are a partner for the body shop and for our customers. Our primary customers are collision centers and mechanic shops. We feel that they are the ones that have the right to charge what they need to charge in order to make a profit. At the end of the day, we all need to be in this industry to make a profit. This isn't a nonprofit industry. We need to make a profit to service our customers well. We need to make sure that our customers, the collision centers, can make a profit off what we charge in order to service the vehicle owner well. And ultimately, the insurance companies need to make a profit as well. Otherwise, you and I are going to be paying to have our vehicles fixed out of our own pocket. So we believe the wealth needs to be spread, but ultimately, our loyalty lies with the customer. For us, it's a really easy decision. At LKQ, we have the acronym DELIVERS for LKQ Delivers. One of our core values in that is the I in DELIVERS for integrity and trust. And when it comes to decisions like this, these values are more than just words on paper for us. It's how we make these decisions. And the integrity part of it comes down to do the right thing for the customer. The other part of this is, if a shop is a DRP shop and they have an agreement with an insurance company, that's their prerogative, and we're there to support them. Ultimately, we're going to work with them to do the best we can to charge a reasonable amount to meet those DRP rates they agreed upon. But at the end of the day, that's a contract between them and the insurance company, not between us and the insurance company.
So, Elitek Vehicle Services. For those of us who are unfamiliar with your company, tell me a little bit about your history, what you're all about, and the services you offer.
Oh, thanks. So we were started in 2006 as Elite Electronics. We started offering mobile services only at that time. We started out of the Dallas area. It was myself and one other technician at the time. We grew that over the years, providing mechanical airbags, theft recovery and replacing stereos. Probably 2008 or so, we started doing ADAS calibrations. Back then, we were just fixing cars. It wasn't an ADAS calibration. It was resetting a blind spot monitor or resetting an adaptive cruise. ADAS wasn't a thing yet. We were doing pre and post scans. They weren't pre and post scans back then. It was just fixing the car the right way. All these fancy terms we have now hadn't been created. We grew that to several states and about 100 technicians when we were fortunate enough to join forces with LKQ in 2019. Shortly after, VTech Electronics out of New Jersey, I believe, they came on board with us. We grew the partnership, and shortly after that, we rebranded to Elitek Vehicle Services. During the time, we also were exploring remote operations. The remote services we felt would provide additional services to our existing mobile customers and also allow us to reach customers that we can't reach with our mobile services that are in more rural areas. So since then, we've grown the business. We've got mobile technicians in over 100 metropolitan areas and 41 states, as well as Canadian operations. And mobile has just continued to grow. We've got close to 300 mobile vans out there now, and continue to succeed with it. Our board of directors feels like this is a great opportunity for the industry.
Great. And so, Don, tell me a little bit about the advantage to using a remote or mobile service such as Elitek versus, say, doing calibrations and scanning in-house or subletting to a dealer. What's the advantage you offer?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty easy, right? From a remote side, if you're doing it in-house and you've got a qualified technician and you have the right equipment, you're doing it right. And that's great. And we're here to support you on that. If ever your technician is on a vacation, or if ever your equipment breaks down, or you ever have a question, we're here to support you as a partner. But in the case you don't have the right technician to do it that can understand reading those scans, that's when we recommend, or you don't have the right equipment, or you don't want to invest in the proper equipment, that's when we suggest subletting it out, whether it's remote, mobile, dealership. We want to make sure the car is fixed correctly. If you don't have the right personnel or equipment, that's when you should look at subletting it out. Remote works out really well if you have personnel on site and you need a scan done really quick. If you're going to pre and post scan all your vehicles, remote works out really well. If you want to have a more personal touch, our mobile team, and you're in an area that we service, our mobile team can do those pre and post scans as well. The pricing is a little bit higher because we have somebody on site, but you have that personal touch. And they're also there to review that vehicle with you in person, to look at it and provide additional recommendations and try to save you some time in the cycle time to where you're not missing stuff and you can see it up front.
So, Don, and this kind of ties into in the beginning when we talked about this controversy going on about insurers trying to control costs. I think there's some confusion out there about what an OE scan is versus an aftermarket scan, and what is an aftermarket scan tool versus an OE tool. A certified body shop might say, well, I have to use my automaker's specific scan tool. Plus, I've got all these aftermarket tools at my disposal as well. I've got additional costs there. I've got to follow the book per the OE. Tell me, is there a difference between an OE and an aftermarket scan, and an OE scan tool and an aftermarket scan tool?
Yeah, the easy answer is yes. There can be a huge difference. And I love the question because it allows me to get into what my background is just understanding these tools. Part of the difference really lies in the coverage of the vehicles that it's going to read and the modules on those vehicles that the scan tool is going to communicate with. So an OE scan, by my definition, and I think the rest of the industry's definition, can only come from an OE scan tool. So an OE scan tool is a scan tool licensed or manufactured, created, whatever terminology you want to use, by the OEM. It's the Tech 2 for the GM older vehicles. It's GDS 2 for newer GM vehicles. But it's a scan tool designed and manufactured or licensed by the OEM. Versus an aftermarket scan tool is a tool that's made by a scan tool manufacturer that has no relationship, or not a licensed relationship, I should say, with the OEM. Now, they may be purchasing their information from the OEM, but typically there's a lag time from the time the OEM releases it to the aftermarket to the time the tool manufacturer receives it. But even in that case, not always are aftermarket scan tools licensing that information correctly. So if they're not, then they're reverse engineering it, and the opportunity exists for it to miss modules or not do all the functions that an OEM scan tool would do. The aftermarket scan tool may work great on a 2010, but it may not work on a 2020. It may work on a 2020, but it may not work on the 2010. You really don't know what it's going to do or what it's not going to do unless you compare it to the OEM scan for that same vehicle. And by that same vehicle, that same trim level when you're there at the vehicle, because you don't know, is it if it does miss something, now you have to look at, is it a problem with the vehicle? Is it a problem with the scan tool? Where's the problem lie? Or is it a problem with the user using the scan tool that didn't know how to use it correctly? So there's so many variables involved. We believe using OEM scan tools is just the way to go. When you do that, you reduce the variable. You don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about, did you miss a module? Because let's face it, in the collision industry, we're working on stuff before the service department sees it in many, many cases. A service department at the Ford dealership may not see a 2025 Ford before the collision industry does. If it doesn't have a problem, but it can get wrecked right off driving off the dealership parking lot. And that scan tool, that aftermarket scan tool, isn't going to have the coverage for that 2025. And no matter how you call it, no matter what fancy marketing terms you want to use it, it's either an OEM scan tool, an OEM scan, or it's not.
So Don, speaking of OEM, all the top experts tell me out there, when it comes to calibration, you must follow the OEM specs to the letter. There's no variation. You have to have a floor that's validated as level in your calibration room or station. The correct lighting, all those things. You have to make sure there's no excess cargo weight in the car. All those things. Tell me your thoughts about that. What happens when an Elitek van goes out and visits a body shop and they don't have the proper environment for calibration?
Yeah, the easy answer is, if they can't provide us the proper environment, we'll work with them to try to find a location that's suitable. But ultimately, if there's no suitable location that we can provide, they can provide, we're not going to do the calibration. We're not going to let that vehicle go. We're going to recommend them to send it somewhere to where they can get the proper calibration done. Ultimately, that's the easiest answer I can give you. What I'll tell you is, in most cases, when it's time for that vehicle to go home and the only suitable location is the bay that's being used by the technician, and that vehicle's ready to go home on a Friday, and the only thing left is an ADAS calibration, normally they find room real quickly and that vehicle gets done. They don't have the right space or the right criteria to get it done, we're not going to do it.
Presented from the Aishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Going back to the beginning, we talked about this controversy that's been raging the last few weeks in the industry about insurers trying to control these costs. You mentioned that, hey, Elitek, as far as you're concerned, the bottom line is your customer is the shop, the body shop, and that's it. That's the ultimate customer you're serving. You talked about the history of Elitek and what you guys do and the services you offer. We talked about the differences between the OEM and aftermarket scan. Any final thoughts on this subject at all?
Yeah, I think, one thing I'd like to hit on is some of the different services we provide. I think I talked about the history, but I didn't get a chance to really get into the services we provide. So if we talk about on the remote side, we obviously have our pre and post scans. We have an integration with CCC. We provide an ADAS recommendation report for our customers. And what's interesting, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is what we provide is highly dependent on what the customer's needs are. Not every customer wants us to provide a parts recommendation, a service plan, or service recommendations or procedural recommendations. It's dependent upon what the customer's needs are, but we can provide parts recommendations. We can provide procedure recommendations or provide the procedures for any given task if a customer asks for it. One of the things that's really popular in our services is programming. So if a body shop replaces let's say a body shop does their own ADAS calibrations, hey, we're here to support you. But a lot of times the front radar needs to be programmed before it can be calibrated. So we can remotely program that for a customer. Or the airbag module got replaced. We can remotely program that for a customer or code it in the case of a Mercedes or a BMW. And we can also do remote ADAS calibrations. So if you have the equipment, but you want to use OEM tooling, but not invest in the OEM scan tools to do your ADAS calibrations, we can provide that remotely for you. The wonderful thing about our services at Elitek is if you're more of a, I like to do it with somebody on site, or if there's times, and there's going to be times, because let's face it, we're not perfect. As much as we like to think that we're really good at what we do, we know we're not perfect. We can't remotely do everything we want to do. And when those situations arise, we've got mobile as a backup. I say as a backup, they're really not a backup. They're our lifesavers. Um, and there's so many things that we can't do remotely. You know, we can't come on site remote. We can't fix a wire remotely. We can't diagnose a vehicle with a blown fuse remotely. We can provide you with the steps, but you've got to have the right personnel there to do it. And if you don't have the right personnel, or you don't have the time to do it, that's where a mobile team comes in. And they can come in with our experienced techs who are highly trained and qualified to come in and diagnose those vehicles. One of the things that we diagnose most common is what we call self-induced pain. That's where the technician plugged in the two different connectors that look alike into the wrong components, or they forgot to plug them in, or didn't plug them in all the way. It is part of the repair process, and that's unfortunate. But when you have a partner like us and we realize it's self-induced pain, we're here to work with you, because we know sometimes the insurance isn't going to pay for that. And we want to make sure that we're making money when you can make money, when the insurance can make money, as a partnership, not as a, well, sorry, your guy hooked up the battery backwards out in the parking lot and it's going to be $4,000. Let us see if we can work with you. We'll try to help you out on that. The other services our mobile team can provide that we can't provide remotely, besides the complex diagnostics. We can do the full ADOS calibrations, as we talked about earlier. We can do the wire repairs and pigtail replacements. So if the front headlight connector got cut off, we can provide that pigtail, have it on site for you in the next day, install it, and have you back up and running. Not to mention, we're going to hook up to the vehicle, clear the codes, and make sure that everything's functioning properly. As I'm sure you've heard on previous podcasts, the part that is, in my opinion, the most important is verifying your work, the test drive, making sure the lights work after you put the pigtail in. Even if the bumper's not on, we're going to put the headlight up there, plug it in, make sure it works, whatever component we're working on. We have plenty of experience in EV and hybrids, disconnecting, removing batteries if needed, so the body shops can do the welding. One of the popular services that we get into is the dash removal. A lot of times when they're putting the frame rails in, the dash has got to be pulled to make sure that it doesn't catch on fire. We do that on a regular basis. We're very, very good at it, and I would like to think we're experts in putting them back in, making sure there's no screws left over, and making sure everything on the dash works. That's one of the things that I think gets missed in our industry, is everybody goes and puts it back in, and a couple of screws laying around, and the hazard button doesn't work, right? So it's important to check all those things. And one of the most popular services is also our full mechanical. A lot of sublet vendors don't provide full mechanical. We'll go in and do a full frame swap on a truck if that's what the insurance has dictated that the vehicle needs and needs to be replaced. We'll do a full frame swap if you've got the space to do it. We'll do it on site for you. We don't have to remove it from your location, and you provide all the parts. All we're doing is providing the labor. So I think that's a pretty in-depth level of services that we provide. But we'd love to expand on that for any of your listeners that have any questions.
Sure, and you mentioned earlier the documentation piece. That's critical, right? So you provide all the documentation for the repairer to prove to the insurer what was done and to give the customer peace of mind that their vehicle is safe, right? So you cover all that documentation.
Absolutely, right. We can provide the procedure that we followed to achieve the results. Unfortunately, with the OEM scan tools, some of them don't have a print report button, if you will. So we're limited to a screen capture that'll show the VIN and show that the procedure was complete. we'll send that with our invoice over to our customer as a JPEG. When there's questions about whether procedure was necessary, we routinely provide the required documentation from the manufacturer to show the body shop, to provide the insurance company that there was a need to do this procedure, and we can provide the OEM recommendations and the OEM position statements to the body shops. All that to back up what we're doing.
Great. Well, Don, I can't thank you enough for your time today. You know, it's still the Wild West out there. You know, scanning and calibration needs to happen on almost virtually every vehicle that comes into a shop now, and there's a lot of misinformation being bandied about. So I really appreciate your time today in setting the record straight, who Elitek is, you know, dispelling some of the myths and rumors out there, and kind of, you know, giving us a good idea of what the process is and how it has to play out today. So I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having us.
I'm Jason Stahl. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this episode of Under the Radar. For more episodes, visit bodyshopbusiness.com.